Common mistakes. What are some of the common mistakes that people or that we see people making when it comes to property investment? My name's Ian. I'm from Ripehouse Advisory, and I'm here today with my trusted colleague, Julian, who's the head of strategy here at Ripehouse Advisory. Welcome, Jules.
Thanks, Ian.
We're here to talk today about some common mistakes. We've got a few listed here. Jules, the first one we're going to talk to is asset type.
Yeah, so very, very common, particularly when you get an investor. They're trying to do one of two things, right? So they're either maybe to become fixated on the area and the market's got away from them. So we want to use kind of current themes. You know, people have become fixated. They want to get into Brisbane, or they want to get into Perth. And maybe they had a budget of say $500,000, $700,000, but the market's just gotten past them. So all of a sudden they just start going, well, I can't afford a house there. What am I going to? I'm going to go get a unit, or I'm going to get a townhouse. And it's just because of the fixation of wanting to get into the area, when we know if we just put our critical thinking hats on, that asset selection, the most important thing when it comes to property. You got asset selection and location. They're both closely tied together. But regardless, if you're in an area which has good long-term growth, if you compare units to homes, there's a massive drop-off in performance. You might say, oh, it's only 1 or 2%. Typically, it's about 2 or 3% difference. As a percentage, we're not talking about just 1 or 2. As a comparison to one another, we're talking as much as 50%. So having a 50% reduced output, really, really big mistake. And then, so the asset selection's a big, big one.
Next one we're going to talk to, and there's a few different areas that this topic broaches across, penny pinchers. So penny pinchers maybe at the buying end. Jules, where do we see this?
And I'm going to throw my hand up and say I am guilty of doing this, particularly, helping friends and family, in particular, pro bono work. Or nothing, coming back the other way, where you become fixated, where I think a lot of investors get into this mindset that buying a property in negotiation becomes a war. There has to be a winner and there has to be a loser in the deal. And that is really a terrible mindset to have when it comes to property. I feel what ends up happening is you're looking at recent comparables. You really want to just focus away and get the best deal. And let me tell you something, if that property's on the market, it's going to sell at market rate more often than not. Yeah. So you can't control the markets. If you're seeing it, so is somebody else online. So that's typically not going to happen. And then, other things start to come into play, where how much time and opportunity costs have you spent by being priced out of a market? I know myself, plenty of client examples where have seen them pass on properties because they wanted to save $5,000 or $10,000, and they've then sat out of the market for 6 months, and that market's gone. If we're using somewhere like Perth, I might have missed out on $100,000 of growth in the 12-month period, sometimes more. I think there's a saying, is it you're fighting over the dollars to pick up the pennies? That's a very, very, very common one.
And we've spoken about this topic before, but I guess some people that we speak to get caught up in the idea of cash flow. And jumping over the dollars to pick up the pennies.
Yeah.
Talk to us about cash flow. Positive cash flow versus the capital growth, which we're focused on.
Yeah. So it's understanding cash flow is heavily reliant on your rental yield, which you're starting with, and then kind of where it's trended in terms of rental growth. The interest rate you're dating at that time, because that's not permanent. That's fluctuating with the market. We go back to say 2020, 2021. Everyone's got good cash flow on their properties at that point because we're getting 2 or 3% interest rates, where now there's not really any such thing. And then your deposit amount, how much of a deposit, if you've got $1 million property, but you've only got a $150,000, $200,000 loan on it, it's cash flow positive property. It doesn't mean that from a return perspective, your leverage is really weak. You're going to be getting, growing your wealth exponentially. So it's understanding what the end goal is. Obviously you can't be having a property that's so negatively geared that it's impossible to keep yourself afloat and you're eating noodles every night. But where you make your real returns, I say to somebody, if I'm sitting here giving you $50 a week, you get your $2,500 at the end of the year. Does it make you feel good that you've got your $50 a week? Or does it make you feel great when you get to 5 or say 8.5 years as a team, 8.5 years down the track, when we sell your property off and it's more than doubled in value? I know that's real cash flow, where I'm walking away with life-changing cash. That for me is a real cash flow. It's the wealth creation, not just the weekly $20 or $50 in my pocket.
Another one we often speak to are people that have this idea that they're going to buy something that's fairly run down and then go in there and fix it up themselves. And
both guilty of this one?
Yes, we have. We've both done this over time, so we can speak from personal experience on this one. But what's some of the pitfalls with that?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, it's understanding your limitations. If there's not much of a return on a poorly executed renovation, for one. So that's number one. If you're not really good on the tools and you've got to learn on the go, you've got to go buy all the tools, your quality work's going to be poor. Are you trying to skimp on the work using cheap materials? All those things really stack up. The biggest one that I think people don't understand is how quick can you get it to turn around?
Yep.
So that's a really, really big one. If it's going to be something that's drawn out over 3 to 6 months and you're getting to it when you've got downtime, you're costing yourself rental income. That's a big one as well. And then the other one is in terms of what is your time worth to you?
Yeah, the human cost.
The human cost. So guilty of this myself, where I used to be, before I was full-time into property, trying to do everything myself. And when I realized that my hourly rate that I could charge through work, if I doubled down and, I'm a big believer in people investing not only in their wealth, but also themselves. So that could mean that you're working more. Yeah, you're taking on further education to progress your income, your salary, a side hustle, whatever it may be. When you're factoring in that if you're making an extra $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 per annum, and then you can go down to the bank and he goes, great, well, I'm going to put that 6 times multiplier. So now that extra $50,000 gets you $300,000 more lending. Great, it's another property that I could potentially buy. So it's just understanding, am I really making a big return on the other one? So
yeah,
that's a big one.
And then the last one that we want to speak to is following potentially the wrong advice, or as it is in the social media world these days, potentially the false gurus out there.
Yeah. And, I've been somebody who's been following property now for probably just over a decade, right? In terms of probably digested a lot of content, saw many people come and go through the market. And, I think it's just trying to understand, you've got to have your critical thinking hat on when it comes to property. If you're trying to go out there and, you fire these people that they're going to say, turn you into passive income within 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, if you really sit down and crunch the numbers, like I said, you put your critical thinking hat on, you project the numbers, and it's not the minute you start investing get rich quick schemes, I call it, it's not get rich quick, it's get rich smart. The moment I did that as an investor, I saw far better returns in terms of how I started to perform. It's just really understanding if someone's spruiking you and off the plan, or we're giving you a huge discount because we buy this land in bulk, or we buy, we have relationships with the builders. That's fantastic, but I can guarantee you they're not a not-for-profit organisation. They're not working for free. They have to make a living, and you're normally the one that's going to be paying for that. So just put your critical thinking out and get some advice, whether that be through. I say it's really important you get advice from people who have experience in it. I think another one that we tie into as well is people get advice from people who are property experts. So what I mean by that is, they're asking their friends and family, and they've got biases, right? They're caring for that individual, and more often than not, they're going to either push them away, or they've had a good experience and push them to someone. You want to be having a chat with an accountant. You want to be having a chat with a financial planner. You want to be having a chat with your broker, or somebody who's actually done it. And if they're referring you to somebody else, you also want to be asking, do you get financially incentivized to be pushing you or telling me this way? Because if those things are all going off, then maybe you want to be just checking that out.
Well, there we have it. Some common mistakes in property investing. If you're wanting to avoid some of those common mistakes and talk to us more about investing with Ripehouse Advisory, click in the show notes below. There'll be a form to fill out there. One of the team will be in touch, and you'll be able to speak with someone like Jules, who'll be able to explain it to you. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, like and click subscribe. But until next time, we'll see you again.